Welcome to our review of the council. Usually we review one council meeting, but this time we're going to talk about two meetings because we had back-to-back days of meetings of the Marshfield Common Council. The first one was on Monday, November 9th. That was a budget meeting, and the second meeting was a regular council meeting. And so at this point, I'll turn it over to our local media and Mike Warren.
Okay, thank you, Steve. I'd like to start with the regular council meeting on the 10th of November. And Mayor, I guess I'll start with you. And I just want to get your reaction to, it's unusual. You know, there's something going on when you have a dozen or so citizens at the back of the room, and 4 or 5 of them get up and make citizens' comments. And that's what we had again at this last meeting on Tuesday, the 10th. Ethics board support. Some had a comment or two to make about the ongoing situation with the chief of police in the city of Marshfield. And I guess we'll just start there because that is, I guess, kind of the news of the last week. And what you heard from the citizen comment portion of the meeting regarding the police chief's position and just that whole ongoing situation, because one of the comments had to do with the Marshfield Professional Police Association basically releasing the news that they had taken a no confidence vote in the chief. Start there and what you heard from those citizens and their comments regarding that situation that's currently ongoing, because I know you had some comments after that during the meeting.
Yeah, it was a very crowded meeting. And actually before, just because of social distancing and whatnot, we have a different room, conference room over there. So we advised everybody that felt, fortunately, I think everybody was wearing masks. And we advised folks that there was an overflow area that if they wanted. So that we did have a lot of folks here. I believe we had 32 members of the police department here and a few retired officers as well. And many members of the public and members of the public, other members of the public were here to vote or give their vote of confidence for the ethics committee that Mr. Wagner started to work on a program for that over the last 3 to 4 months. I believe he did that before when he was an alderman as well, and apparently it didn't go through. And this one was the final reading, and that went through, and there were people here that were showing their support of that and also requesting that they be considered for those positions. So I thought that was good. There were a lot of people here that were there to here to give their opinion and on the current situation with the police chief and what they believe should take place. And then there was a representative, Kevin Hamill, from the Marshfield Professional Police Association that read his letter, and it was a vote of no confidence in Police Chief Gramza. It was a moving night. There is no doubt about that. It was a very moving night. There was a sense of frustration in this council chambers that was literally palpable. And because it is an ongoing investigation and everything out, now it has to go through the court system and everything else. Of course, there's still nothing that we can really say. My chief concern, though, is our police department, knowing that we fully support them. Being a police officer in today's times is not an easy job. And there's enough that they deal with on the national media with all this with the police. It's a whole other thing when they have to deal with that and maybe public perception, but then also have an internal issue. I believe that makes it sometimes hard to show up to work. And this is why I said what I did, which is I fully support them. In my opinion, they're the bravest men and women out there. I mean, every single day they pull a car over for somebody didn't do a signal or brake lights out and ends up being something completely different. So we did listen to them. We did hear them. There are things taking place, but, and there are things taking place that are moving quickly, but they do need time to go through certain channels. So everything is being worked on, for sure. There's nothing being left unsettled or undone. So we have two issues. We have to deal with the issue with Police Chief Gramza, and that will be dealt with appropriately. There is no doubt about that. We also have to deal with the morale and the support of our police department and our fire department, because our first responders, they take care of us. I mean, when we run into emergency, we call them. And now is our time to support them, even more so, and to help them get through this, because this is very difficult for them. So it was not fun to listen to the frustration, but I totally understand it. And things are moving forward with, what we can do.
One of the things that people say oftentimes is business or government needs to be run more like a business. And, I don't think business would have public comment times at their board meetings. Government sometimes is messy, and the reason is because we have people, and they have cares and concerns and issues that they want to deal with. And sometimes we can take immediate action, sometimes we can't. I think as Bob just explained, in this case, it's been going through the channels. We're working with legal, and there's things happening out there, and they need to run their course, and people need to be as patient as they possibly can be while we see this, stepping through the process. But it is important that people have a chance to weigh in, to be heard. And I think that was good on Tuesday night, even though it was hard to listen to. I agree. Hearing people who are hurting and saddened by what's going on around them, and they just feel like they need to cry out and say some things. But it's good that they were able to do that. I think the council and the mayor received that, as did other people in the room. And we take that to heart. We take that seriously. If you think what's happened in the last few months, I mean, we've had the issue of the cemetery. Maybe we'll talk about that in a minute. People have concerns. They need to have that venue. And I think they appreciate having the opportunity to come to a council meeting, a meeting of their elected officials, and let them know how they feel as something is being worked on.
There was a closed session item having to do with, it says update on employment law issues involving police department. Did that issue have anything to do with the situation with Chief Gramza? If so, what was the issue there? Was that somehow tied in? Anyone?
Yeah, that was tied into the issue that you're talking about, that we've been talking about for the last 5 minutes or so. We have a labor law firm that is working with us, and a representative from that firm gave the council an update in closed session about the process, largely. I mean, talked about some of the specific issues involved, but really kind of trying to give an idea from a timetable standpoint, what's going to happen now, what kind of things the mayor and council need to be aware of as we pass through the process, how long it might take, and those types of things. And we really can't really say much at this point, but it's important to have that touch base with the people who are advising you and who are doing, some work on your behalf. And they have been doing work on our behalf on this issue. So it was a good conversation. It lasted a long time, truthfully, but there's nothing that we can report from that at this time.
Nothing on the process or timeline or anything that I guess people are kind of wondering, what is happening next? We have the formal charges in Wood County Circuit Court. Are we just, in the meantime, Chief Grams is on paid administrative leave. I know that's a sticking point with a lot of citizens. He's getting paid while he's also being charged or waiting to face charges. And as the city continues to rack up legal bills regarding this, and there's a lot of issues that people are kind of having an issue with for good reason. So what is the timetable? What does the process look like at this point? Any comments you can make at all?
Well, you can look at, first of all, I have all those same frustrations, as does Steve, as does the council, as does everybody. But my frustration does nothing to the process. And so I believe on the complaint that was filed, I think the next step from that is December
20th, the 21st,
or 21st,
yeah.
where there will be an initial appearance for those issues where charges were filed. So from a timeline point of view, that's the next thing. Now, you watch, we're all aware. I mean, if you go on, in many cases that we see nationally, people want everything right now, which of course everyone does. But there is a process in place, and there's a process in place so that the people making the charges and the alleged have their time in court. We can't hurry that up. And especially with COVID, what is that going to do? We don't know. So we do have to sit there and wait for the court system to go through. In regards to the being on paid leave, that is something that every city and every department deals with, and that's just part of the process. And there are just certain things that the process is moving. There are things taking place, but we have to let the process go through. And until we get the results of those processes, then we have to wait.
It is irritating. I know it came up back in, I think even September, when a resident came to the podium here at a council meeting and said, it's been 45 days or whatever it had been at that point, and we have somebody getting paid to not work. And so now double that time. We're in November. It's been 90 days. But when somebody is on, leave while an investigation is going on, this is what happens. It's paid administrative leave during that time. And it doesn't matter whether it's 30 days or 90 days or whatever. So as much as I know people are kind of wondering why we would pay somebody this long when they're not fulfilling their duties, it's not uncommon, and it's really, basically a requirement or expectation of what occurs during investigations of this nature.
So with an ongoing investigation, does he have to remain an employee, or at what point does the city just say, well, look, there's no way he keeps his job as chief, right, through all of this, regardless of the outcome of charges or not? At what point does the city just say, let's just terminate the chief, get somebody else in that position, and move on from at least that part of this equation?
The city of Marshfield has a fire and police commission that actually has optional powers, which only about, I think, maybe 10 cities or about that many across Wisconsin have. So they have a fair amount of authority in terms of the overall operation of the police and fire departments. And, at some point, this may end up in their hands, the way you're talking about it, if there's a thought of disciplinary action or removal or whatever. So, that time may come. That, believe it or not, that's not a council matter in a city with optional powers. But, short of that, we're still, as the mayor said earlier, waiting for the information to come in, talking to our labor law council and kind of walking through the process in a very thoughtful manner, trying to make certain that everything we do is well reasoned.
So the commission could make that decision basically at any time. They don't have to wait. He doesn't have to remain an employee with the city while this goes through the court process. I mean, there's no law that says he's got to be an employee while they investigate and see this thing through.
If and when there's actually a referral to the commission, they would have the opportunity to hear the evidence, if you will, and make a determination about any corrective action that would be taken in this matter. We're not there right now, but yeah, I mean, we don't sit on hold endlessly, if that's what you're asking, waiting for a final result through the court system. There may be a situation where people are looking at information and reports and can make decisions along the lines of what you're talking about, but we're not there right now.
This is part of the frustration of certainly the people, but it is the way our system is in the city of Marshfield. I believe that there are 8 cities in the state that have police and fire commissions similar to this. So if I'm in the public, I'm saying, okay, so you guys can't do anything, but you guys can. It seems like it's a pass the buck situation. As an elected official, I'm telling you, to me, it seems like a pass the buck situation. But it is the system that is in place. And so we can't because of the statutes of the optional powers of the Police and Fire Commission, we have to follow that process. And so some questions, these are very valid, I think would be very valid to ask the Police and Fire Commission. I think that would be reasonable, even though you would probably get the same vague answers that we're giving, because they've got to protect the rights of all involved. That's part of our system in this great country. Is there are systems and processes in place, and if you don't go through any one of those processes, there's the loophole. So you don't want that. You don't want to miss something or do something wrong, or from our standpoint, say something wrong that then throws off the whole thing. That we would not be, as far as myself and the council, we would not be effective elected officials in that capacity if we did. And same thing of the city administrator and others involved.
I guess to put it in kind of a summary, Mike, I'd say that here's one way to think of it. Regardless of whether the chief is or is not ever found guilty of some offense, through the court system, the ultimate determination of his employment status will be made by the Fire and Police Commission. And that's where we're at right now. And but again, at this point, we're still going through the process with the direction of our Labor Law Council and watching what happens.
Well, and Mayor, ethics is a word we've used now in the last month or so here. We mentioned recently this ethics board, I guess it is, or committee, that is now formed. I guess the council did sign off on that on Tuesday, that there was some, not a lot of discussion about it. It was the second time through for this, and it did go through. Maybe just talk about that. Do you like it? Do you like the idea? Do you like how it's set up? And how does this move forward now?
I certainly like the idea, because it's there actually, I think, as a benefit to the elected officials. Sometimes we in committee meetings, there are certain times when you have to abstain. If I know for sure that the person requesting something is an associate of mine or something like that, that's easy. That's a recusal. And sometimes I think people could sit in on things that maybe theoretically they shouldn't. And so this is a nice thing to have with those folks who are properly trained. We can actually call them and say, hey, this is who it is. This is what I do. And, and this is how if there is an association there, can I sit on that or should I not? That's really, really nice to have. So I'm very, very happy with that. The other thing is, for the public, now when they make a complaint, they're actually going to be going to people that are not on the council.
Yeah.
Right? Because then, there's certain things you could look at that and go, oh, well, they're just council members, so they're going to make sure. No, that's not the case. These are citizens that, and the discussion the other night that wasn't there the prior nights is, what kind of information should we get on the people that are applying? Should they fill out an application and give a resume? Should they just send an email? I'd like to be considered. Should they come to a meeting before the vote to introduce themselves so people can see? That was a lot of the discussion the other night. And then when somebody does make a complaint, this committee can take a look at the complaint, see if it's a reasonable complaint, or is it, because one thing we do see right now across this country, if you turn on the news for 2 seconds, somebody's investigating somebody for something. So we don't want it to just be a dumping ground. But if it is used properly, I think it's a great benefit. And it's a great benefit for the citizens to see that if I have an issue, I can make the complaint. There will be independent people that look at this, that follow through and either dismiss it because there's no cause, or take a look at it, and the whole process is really quite transparent. So I think it's a great thing.
Yeah, I think Bob hit on both parts really, really well. The first part, or I'll take it as the first part, about citizens having an avenue now to feel like they're going to be heard in a different way rather than just raising to the council. Think about it. If somebody in the council they believe has done something inappropriate in terms of how they've conducted themselves and how they voted on something they shouldn't have or whatever, you're going to the council to complain about the council. In this case, it would be, other people outside of elected officials hearing this and deciding whether or not they saw an ethical issue. But the other part, which I hope to be the bigger part, is the proactive part. That someone like the mayor, like somebody else, could actually go to them proactively and say, look, here's the deal. My brother-in-law works for this company, and they're going to be looking for a contract from the city now, blah, 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 and get a read as to whether or not they should be stepping aside. I get calls often, and I think the city attorney gets calls often like that, and people are really trying to do the right thing. This will be a way of looking in advance of things that are coming up and saying, look, I don't want to cross that line. Give me a read. Is this appropriate for me to be participating in and ultimately voting on or not? So I think the proactive part may be more beneficial ultimately than the reactive part of complaints. We'll see.
So what was I can't remember the timeline on that. They didn't really set a timeline. Now that I remember the discussion, it's sort of this open-ended. They take applications, resumes, cover letters, whatever they're called, from interested people to put this in place over the course of the next, couple months or something?
Yeah, it seems like that. And then, so there'll be more information coming out on this. Our communication department is putting out something that will be given to all the press. And we'll put it out on different platforms as well for people that do want to apply. And there will be the information that you have to send in, or whatever. And there were literally people here that night that showed interest and were really, 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 really engaged. Very, very nice to see as a public or an elected official that you've got that kind of engagement from the public. That's a really, really nice thing. And then once that takes place, then there's going to be an onboarding period where they then have to go through some training and some review to see these things and work with, I believe it's a Wood County attorney, of course, Jen Rayque, our HR, and our HR director and the city attorney can then all work together towards different things because, of course, they're going to have questions and they will kind of develop a process. So that onboarding would take, I would imagine, a couple of months. So if you put a couple of months together twice, it's 4 or 5 months. I would think that would be something that's there. I don't think there's anything set in stone.
No.
So it's a great thing for the city.
Yeah, I think it shows what we want to be, and Bob's talked about this, others have talked about this. We want to be responsive. People get frustrated when they come to the podium and they want to know the status of the investigation with respect to the police chief, things we can't talk about. But where we can be responsive, where we can be transparent, where we can be engaging people to show that we care about their complaints and concerns, that's what we want to be doing. And I think this is one more step along those lines.
And I will say this, I would like to really add to this because we as the city, you take a lot of hits, if you will, because you're an elected official. And you know that going in, so it's like you can't complain about it, and I certainly don't. But one thing if you really look at this, basically somebody came in and made a complaint. They made an accusation, complaint, or whatever. The person appropriately went to HR. HR, I think, within a very short period of time, all of a sudden the alarm sounded and this started to be reviewed but immediately.
Yeah.
And from that point in August to last Friday, when you read the charges to me, remember that?
I do.
But so here's the thing.
Yeah.
From August until that time is a relatively short period of time. And when people want to know now what's going on, well, from the other day, whatever that was, the 6th or 7th, what we know for sure, what everyone wants to know, what's the timeline? Well, what's on that court complaint is to go to December 21st. So there's the timeline. It's all right there. What can be done in between then is preparation for those times. And so if you really look at it, in my opinion, the city did a great job in response. And our, starting with Jen Rakeu, who did, in my opinion, just an amazing job, and Steve and to get this going. If I remember correctly, I believe something happened on a Wednesday, and the council was called into a special meeting on Friday afternoon at 3:00 to advise of what was taking place. That is a very short period of time. That just lets you know that the city jumped all over it, which is I think, a great compliment to the city.
Yeah, I appreciate those comments. And you know, sometimes we talk about the council and the mayor's frustration, and they share the frustrations of the citizens that we don't have more answers and that it's taken a while. I can talk on behalf of Jen and me, who are here at City Hall every day, and you know, we have conversations with Labor Law Council. We want to see this. We want to see resolution. Everybody wants to see resolution so we can move on. And it just doesn't always work that way. And a case of this nature is one of those times.
It was a common council meeting too, where it was, you know, the comments that were made, it took us, 35 minutes, I think, 40 minutes to get to the actual agenda, because comments, that was, you know, kind of the story of the meeting. And it didn't stop with citizen comments. It didn't stop with the police officers' comments from the MPPA. The staff update portion, there were more comments there after citizens' comments, I think, from the last meeting that maybe prompted this. Removal of items from cemetery. That was an issue in October, where they did their kind of fall cleanup, and Justin Casperson, the Parks and Recreation Director, kind of answered some concerns. Mayor, were you happy with what you heard? Did he answer the concerns adequately? Are there still unanswered questions, or what was the update exactly? What did you hear, and are you happy moving forward with that whole situation at the cemetery?
Well, am I happy about the situation at the cemetery? I think it was very unfortunate what took place before. There's one aspect of this where there was a lot of communication that went out, but it didn't necessarily go out from our communications department. Maybe it didn't hit a lot of platforms. We can learn by that. And that's, I think, when you have a problem, this is the great thing, I think. I believe that there was clearly a problem, and we learned from it. And so when that department goes to do this next year or whatever the issue is, I think they've seen that they've got to be more proactive on different communications, and really getting it out there maybe a little bit better. And they're open to that. But I will say this, Justin Casperson came. He took responsibility for everything, which good for him. Realized that it was, you know, it did explain that they did everything that they could. But this is one of those unique situations where maybe you did everything that you could, but he acknowledged, and I believe everybody acknowledged, all of this other stuff of everything that we could have done and our intent is fine, but it doesn't do anything to relieve the pain. Mm-hmm. And I really appreciated the fact that he said, to those of you that are negatively affected, I understand, I'm sorry. I think it was a very sincere apology. I know that the entire staff there has been giving a lot of apologies, and what can we do to make it better? And I just don't know that there's any more that can be done. So I did appreciate the fact that he came to give that update, because that too was very tense. And I think he did a great job, and I do support him. And I do believe that they learned from this. I also know this. There was no ill intent. There was nothing like that. It's actually trying to make things better. Having said that, I still 100% understand the pain of the people affected, and I would never, ever, to those people, try to say, well, we did this, 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 and this, because it's not going to take away the pain. And I'm sorry it happened. My heart goes out to them. There's no question about it. We learned from it, and we'll do better.
Yeah, there's not a lot I can say to add to the mayor's answer. That was very good. A couple things, I did have a conference call with the Park and Recreation Director and other staff that were involved in this, a week and a half ago. And I could detect right away that they felt bad about the way this went down. I also got the sense that we cleared the bar in terms of, the notifications that have to be made. But the issue is, can you go beyond that? And I think that's what we've learned. Did we use all the platforms that are appropriate and available to us to get the word out? And I think we found that the answer to that is no, even though I think they tried with, some local media and signage and other things to let people know that this moment was coming. Part of what hurt us is the fact that there's a 2-decade, if not longer, history of not doing this. Despite the signs saying that October 1st will clean out, we generally haven't done that. So it was a surprise, even though I think our staff was thinking, look, we tried to tell you this for a few months and nobody seemed to get the message. But people are very sensitive about the final resting places of their loved ones. I learned that when I had my first job in Wisconsin as city administrator in Ripon, and we get the call every year about the conditions of the grass at Memorial Day. And I remember the first time I heard this, people were saying, well, there's some weeds out there in the cemetery. And I thought, it's May 28th. There's weeds all over my yard. But then, it became apparent to me that this is a time when people go out to see, the grave sites of their loved ones, and they take pride in it, and they want to see the city take pride. So, are they under more scrutiny? Yeah. But I get why. I get people's concern about those final resting places. But again, just following up on what Bob said, I think we've owned up to the fact that we could have done better. Despite the fact that we certainly cleared the bar about advertising and those kind of things, at least to meet the baseline requirements. But I think that'll help us going forward. And I think we've tried hard. Our staff, Amy Beauchamp, Dan Rogers, and others have followed up with people and said, look, how can we help you, get your belongings back? And we apologize. I think they've done a good job after the fact in terms of trying to show care and concern for these individuals. I just look forward to a closer working relationship between the Park and Recreation Department and the Communications Director going forward as we head into 2021.
There were anything else on that one, on that topic? No. There were 3 other closed session items. Was there anything to report from review purchase offer for property located within TIF District 7, review lease extension for property located at 305 West 3rd Street, and update on litigation involving Tri-Media LLC? Any update on those items?
There is one. We came out in an open session and did approve a lease with Weinbrenner Shoes. That's at 305 West 3rd Street. It's a 3-year lease with opportunities for 2 more years of renewal with the approval of both parties, 2 1-year renewals going forward, so 5 years total. We are happy to have Weinbrenner remain in our community. There's been discussion about seeing if there might be other opportunities for them in their needs, for a facility longer term. And we'll continue to talk with them about that, whether that be the business park, the industrial park, whatever. But at least this secures for them and for the city that for at least 3 years and possibly longer that they'll be part of this community. They've been here a long time and they're a good company.
And nothing on either of the other 2?
No.
Okay. Anything else from that regular meeting that stands out to either of you that you wanted to highlight or update us on?
I guess I'll just touch on the fact that we did approve council did approve the communications plan. And so now we'll be boiling that down. The communications director will be working with me and other staff and the council and kind of implementing that, putting legs on that plan in terms of improving our internal and external communications, being more consistent with our messaging. And I look forward to that unfolding in the next few weeks and months as we go ahead. I would say that's the only other item that I would find noteworthy from the regular session.
was a council meeting on Monday, the 9th of November as well. Mayor, I'm assuming this is, well, it was the ongoing budget process, right? Where was that process at the end of that meeting? Where's that budget at right now? That budget proposal after that, I guess it was the, final one?
It was the final one, and now it goes up for a public hearing. And I believe that, when is that coming back?
November 30th.
November 30th. There'll be a public hearing on that budget. And it was very interesting. We've been back and forth with city staff. The meeting prior to that, we asked the Steve and Ron to go back and cut more. So look for areas to cut. And there were some suggestions I made that they can cut, and they put together some good, reasonable cuts. And here, this is the issue. You have to be careful with what you cut, because you can't, and eventually you can only cut so much before you start affecting services. And people know that if they call the fire department, they're going to be there in a short period of time. The police department, the streets, all these different things, those things have to go on. And city staff came back with some good cuts that were there, and the council was happy with those additional cuts. Then it got down to, okay, now what do we need to do from the tax increase? Because we were still selling our product in $9.54, but it was costing us $10.31 to make. So now we've made a lot of inroads since this first started last year. And again, historically, if things would have been handled properly, let's just say, and there would have been small incremental things for the 10 years prior, we would not be in this position.
Right.
But now we're in the position of where it could affect our Moody's rating. So Moody's was very clear. We bumped you, we may bump you again because we don't think that y'all are going to do what you need to do to fix the problem. In which case then, if you don't go up enough, then next year you start off deeper in the hole. Right now, the hole is 8 feet. If you don't go up enough, next year you start in 12 feet, and you can't just continue to cut. So that's when the tax increase comes. Staff was recommending, Ron Alman, our financing director, was recommending to go up 8.2% to 10.25. Steve did not believe that we would be able to do that. So the whole thing was, how high, what is the lowest high amount? Gosh, that sounds weird. But what is the lowest high amount where if you're in a pool, imagine you're sitting there in a pool and you've got to breathe. Basically what going up to 45 cents just puts about half of your nose out. So you can still breathe, but if a big wind comes up, you're in a problem. So council members got that. And the other thing was our credit rating, because if it doesn't go up enough, then when we do future where we're going to have to go out and we're going to have to borrow, your interest rates go up substantially. The other thing is, if you go down too low, then you have to allocate, you just cut a lot. Well, now you have to increase because now you're going to have more debt expense. So the way this whole thing works is, Steve and Ron understand it, but it's really something. So the council made the decision because Ed Wagner stood up here for about 5 minutes. When it got to the point of, okay, we've talked enough, we know what we need to do. What's the tax increase going to be? He was up here for maybe 3 to 5 minutes just standing saying, I'm ready for the council to make a motion. And it was quiet. Mm-hmm. And then, so any council member at that time could have said, my motion is this. And the one council member, Rosenditch, in District 3, his was to accept the budget with the new cuts that city staff had made and to go for the 8.1 or 2% increase all the way up to 10.25. Now, that's about a 70-cent increase. So that means on a $100,000 house, your taxes would go up $70. 200,000, your taxes would go up $140. But here's the thing. That then theoretically solves that problem. So now we're back to where we're normally functioning. It's costing us $10.30 to make the product, and that's what we're charging. Now, for future years, you can at least then go to, if you have to, small increases or decreases or whatever, but you're running, it's so much better and more efficient to run at. And that motion carried 6-4. And initially, there was a thought process that this was a budget resolution, and it was not. It was not a budget resolution, which the budget, a resolution like that takes not just a simple majority, but at least 7 members. So then we kind of realized after that, Mr. Wagner was looking for another thing, and then we took a break to clarify that because if you remember a couple of years ago, one of the budgets I had to break a tie, and that was 5-5, and this isn't anything really different. So then it came down to we're having that discussion, and during that time, Ron is back there with his calculator and papers flying everywhere, and he realized that it did not need to be an 8.2% increase, but rather a 7.1 to get us to 1025. So then the discussion from there went to, okay, then we all know it was 1025, but we had to make sure. So then we amended that motion to be an increase of 7.1. So the effect is the same. It's $10.25. Surprisingly, when that motion went, then that went to a vote of 7-3. So, and then the next vote was then one to send it to the public hearing that will be on the 30th. So, hopefully then if the Moody's sees that, okay, they made a big move, they solved the issue, because it would have been very easy for us to do this over years. And then we knowingly then are going to have our credit really downgraded, which would cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars over the next decade on higher, it would be a lot more. So that's what is going there. It's a big hit. I was, quite frankly, I was surprised, but I understand it. I really did not want to have, with the information I had at the time, you'll remember, I didn't want to have any tax increase. But when I saw just how, because facts matter, and, my opinion doesn't matter to the facts. But when you look at the facts, you're kind of like, we would be hurting the citizens to not do one. So nobody's going to enjoy their taxes going up, but at least I think doing it this way, then we won't be able to go back for the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years and say, right, well, we're still fixing that issue from before. Now we're just going to be able to move on.
Yeah, very well said. I cannot commend the mayor and the council enough for the way they handled this. I mean, this is painful to talk about this. When you normally talk about, an increase of taxes 1%, what do you think, 1.5%? Can we do this at all? It's COVID-19. It took a while to get to this point, but by doing this, they have taken an outstanding step of saying, okay, we want to go undergo the surgery instead of doing the minimum of taking some medication and coming back to see the doctor in a week. I mean, that's really the way I think of it. They took the dive, and as a result, the starting point for next year's budget is going to be much better. I talked about it with the finance director this morning, what this has meant, the step they've taken with the tax rate, but also with the reductions they've made in the last 2 meetings, have reduced the deficit in the general fund to a much more manageable number. So we are going to be looking much better when we start this process next summer. It won't be all, what do they say, rainbows and unicorns necessarily, but we'll be back to a place that we can operate from. And I can't give them enough credit for that. it's true that Ron and I were kind of doing the good cop, bad cop. That's what I told him. I said, you're telling the patient what they need to hear. I don't think they're going to come in for surgery. So I'm going to try and figure out how we can get the patient moving in the right direction without totally resolving it right now. But at least we'll be making steps. At the very least, we'll be stopping the bleeding. And I think that's where they were for a while. But when they, I maybe sold them short, because I think when the mayor and the council realized that we're going to come back next year and have another painful conversation, they said, you know what, I think we need to do this, and we need to tell our story to the taxpayers. We need to explain. I mean, if I'm told I'm going to have a 7% tax rate increase, I want someone to tell me why when I'm struggling to pay the bills and stuff like that. But I think if they understood what's going on, how we've underfunded our product, how this step gets us to where we need to be to begin operating in a more normal fashion, I'm hopeful that they'll get it. I believe that they will.
So again, just to clarify, we're biting the bullet here, the structural deficit that we've talked about that kind of, was created over this 10 to 12 year period. They're kind of biting that off all in one big bite, and it's gone now with this 7.1% increase?
What this does now is to mean that we are now fully funding our debt payments without transferring monies from some other fund to cover that. So we're in a position now where we're dealing only with the general fund deficit, which, there's still one there, clearly, but it's been cut down a fair amount. And, we think with some of the other steps we're taking and, our commitment to those steps, that we can erode that over time. Where if we started out, even where I proposed wouldn't have been good. If we started out even lower than that, 9.70 or 9 point whatever, we would have started next year again with hundreds of thousands of dollars not available to us to keep eroding this and to be showing ourselves better to Moody's, to be showing ourselves better to the public that they're in financially sound condition. You're supposed to have between 25 and 30% of your annual operating expenses in your reserve fund. Sometimes we call it a savings account. But we've been down around 10 to 15%. In fact, we were almost teetering into going into single digits. That's not where you want to be. That doesn't suggest you're prepared for a crisis. It doesn't suggest you're prepared for even normal operations. If anything, throws you for a loop. And again, I'm going to say it one last time because I really want to say this heartfelt. I want to thank the council and commend them on saying, you know what, this is not fun, but this is a step we need to take. We need to take our medicine and to start putting ourselves in a place where we can be more confident about our future.
Realistically, by doing what we're doing, it's the equivalent of those of us at home. Right now, in essence, maybe we didn't, in a job we had before, we didn't have enough money. So now what we're doing, we found a job where we can make enough money to pay our bills, as opposed to if it would be lower, then we would be at that lower job. And then what we would do is pay what we can here and go over here to our credit card and borrow money from our credit card to pay our other credit card. That doesn't do any good. And I think that's understandable. It's a hard bite. We can go back and say for 10 years, if they would have gone up a nickel every year, we wouldn't even be having this conversation. But what's done is done. So here's the problem. In the next year, we can move on. And if we can move on and we can do this, it's going to be painful. But if we're really looking at maintaining our credit rating and getting them, Moody's, thinking a different thing, then I think it's a win. It's not a guarantee that they're going to do it. But I think going this far, I can't see them going lower.
I agree. And one more thing about the benefit of these last two meetings, and the mayor said this, he and I have talked about this before. If we're going to ask the citizens to pay a tax increase, maybe a significant tax increase, we've got to be able to tell them that we did everything we could to curb expenses. So when I came in initially and proposed the budget, I felt really good about it. A 0.4% increase in general fund expenses, that's pretty good considering all the things we don't control. Union salaries that go up automatically, cost of refuse and recycling services and other things that, we pay our vendors for going up. 0.4% looks really good. So then the first meeting, we got that down to 0. Now I'm thinking we can tell the public we're spending the exact same dollar amount as last year. Again, if you're looking to increase taxes, I think you want to say more than that. And with the work that the mayor and council did, we can now say, you know what, your taxes are going up. But not only did we keep expenses in line, we actually cut expenses by a fair amount over last year, dollar for dollar. So it wasn't like we just said, well, let's raise taxes to cover the whole amount. We made sure that the expense side of the 2021 budget shows that we get it, and there's a commitment to our part of the deal too, besides just increasing your tax bill. We were trying to curb expenses to the most prudent degree possible.
What was very interesting is you basically saw democracy in action. Mm-hmm. And the final component from that will be the public input on the 30th. That'll be democracy will fully speak. But if you were in here in these council chambers for those meetings, they were tense. They were nobody was taking this lightly. City staff wasn't, the administrator, Ron Almond, the council, everyone was taking this very seriously. You could see tensions arise. And it was, this was nothing that was sugar-coated or rubber stamped by any stretch. And that was very interesting to see. Even when people got upset, it's like, okay, I don't like what I just heard. The meeting's over. Now we got to go find this and we got to do that. And it was very interesting to see democracy at work. And the final component of democracy is what the public has to say on the 30th. And when they come, I hope there's a really good explanation on why why we're in the situation, and that what the council has attempted to do is completely fix the problem.
I'll tell you one thing, though. Our financial advisor, Ellers, is going to be very pleased, and they probably are. I'm sure Ron has talked to them in the last couple of days. You look back to January of 2019 when we hit the council and the mayor with the news about the TIF transfers and those types of things. And look at what we've gone through since then. It's been kind of painful at times. We've had to modify some things. We took a project out of the capital improvement plan for next year, backed it up a year, the reconstruction of 17th over by the fairgrounds. We've had to make some tough decisions, but the patient has come a long ways. I mean, if you look at the steps, and Ron Almond has been a huge part of that, guiding us through it. And now to see ourselves coming out on the other end of the tunnel in the next 12 to 24 months, it's good to see it. It shows a responsible government reacting to a difficult situation.
All right. Does that do it?
I think so.
All right. Well, Mayor Bob McManus, City Administrator Steve Barg, post-council wrap-up. Thank you both for being here today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mike.